think of the NES, we usually think about the blocky sprites of Super Mario Bros. Or the simple grid layouts of The Legend of Zelda. However, late in the console's lifespan, developers figured out how to push the console far beyond its original limits. Through clever programming tricks, advanced memory mapping, and masterful pixel art, studios squeezed parallax scrolling, massive boss sprites, and vibrant cinematic cutscenes out of a machine released in the early 1980s. So here are 15 underappreciated NES games that still look absolutely stunning. Journey to Silius, 1990. Developed by Sunsoft in 1990, the game began development as a licensed adaptation of the Terminator before losing the rights. Now, rather than scrapping the project, the developers retooled the assets, creating a title that retains a heavy militaristic sci-fi atmosphere. The result is a run-and-gun platformer that features some of the most impressive pixel art on the NES, with detailed backgrounds that give the game a cinematic flair. The main character, Gimmick, starts with a standard handgun, but acquires 5 additional heavy weapons throughout the campaign, including a shotgun, machine gun, homing missiles, grenade launcher, and a laser. It's a difficult game with a focus on survival and inventory management, as each weapon has its own ammo, and you have to use the weapon smartly and conserve ammo in order to survive. The background tells the story of this ruined, desolate world in detail that goes beyond 8-bit. You adventure through failed skyscraper cities, underground bases filled with open, sparking circuitry, and sprawling factories that stretch endlessly into the horizon. Vice, Project Doom, 1991. Developed by ICOM in 1991, Vice Project Doom is easily one of the most polished action games on the system. You play as Gwen Hart, a detective in a futuristic world investigating a mysterious alien substance and a criminal syndicate. The narrative here is surprisingly good for a non-RPG NES game, using elaborate anime-style cinematic cutscenes with great artwork. The main weapon is a laser whip that feels like a futuristic version of Castlevania's, and also have to switch between a .44 Magnum and grenade, but you need to carefully manage your resources, making use of the whip to save your bullets and grenades. But what really makes this one stand out from the others is the gameplay variety. Most of it is a side-scroller, but it adds in top-down driving stages where you're drifting corners and shooting enemy cars, and even first-person rail shooter sections that feel like an arcade game. The controls remain tight and responsive throughout, and with all these sprites and cutscenes, it's amazing they managed to fit all of it into an NES cart. Kabuki, Quantum Fighter, 1990. Developed by Human Entertainment in 1990, who would later create the Clock Tower series, you play as Colonel Scott O'Connor, a military operative who transfers his consciousness into a mainframe computer to stop a rogue virus. But, instead of manifesting as a soldier or a cyborg, the computer interprets his avatar as a kabuki actor, long red hair. This wide concept allows the art direction to show off by blending ancient theatrical Japanese aesthetics with dense futuristic cyberpunk environments, contrasting the bright red and white of the protagonist's traditional garb against dark, mechanized backgrounds filled with pulsing circuitry and metallic platforms. The animation quality immediately sets the game apart from standard action platformer. For example, your primary attack involves whipping your massive mane of hair at enemies, which animates with a surprisingly fluid, multi-frame swinging motion. Boss encounters pit you against massive, multi-jointed robotic creatures that take up significant portions of the screen without causing significant flicker or slowed down. Supported by highly detailed anime-style cinematic cutscenes between levels, the entire package stands as a masterful display of late-generation 8-bit graphical power. Kickmaster, 1992. Developed by Kid and published by Taito in 1992, Kickmaster blends high fantasy tropes with complex martial arts mechanics. After the king and queen of Lowrill are murdered by the evil wizard Belzid, and a martial artist named Thonolin embarks on a quest for revenge. The art direction here features a dark, gothic aesthetic, utilizing a smartly chosen color palette to render ruined castles, haunted forests, and dank caverns. The developers prioritized dense, atmospheric background details, layering the environments with atmospheric set pieces such as crumbling statues, twisting vines, and jagged rock formations that give the world a distinct, ominous vibe. The animation team's skill is on display, especially in Thonlin's extensive combat moveset, as the gameplay revolves around an RPG-like leveling system where you unlock an expanding arsenal of different kicks, from sliding sweeps to flying knee drops. Each new martial arts technique features uniquely drawn frames of animation, allowing the combat to remain fluid and dynamic throughout the game. Defeated enemies erupt into a shower of collectible items that bounce physically around the screen, adding a chaotic but visually engaging layer of particle effects to the moment-to-moment action. Shatterhand, 1991. Developed by Natsume in 1991, Shatterhand originated in Japan as a licensed title based on the Super Rescue Soul Brain television series, before receiving a complete thematic overhaul for Western audiences. The localized narrative places players in the role of Steve Herman, a police officer who loses his arms in a skirmish with a rogue military faction and receives cybernetic replacements to dismantle the Syndicate's robotic army. Natsume created a bleak, industrial cyberpunk aesthetic characterized by dense, metallic environments. The stages range from burning oil refineries to crumbling cityscapes to high-tech anti-gravity facilities. The devs utilized dark, contrasting color palettes to give the metal surfaces a heavy, worn texture, while animated background elements like flickering flames and cascading waterfalls add life to the backgrounds. Steve's cybernetic punches animate with speed and weight, causing metallic enemies to explode into debris. By collecting letter icons hidden throughout the levels, players summon floating robotic satellites, and by collecting the sequence of icons while a satellite is active, Steve merges with a robot, creating a suit of power armor that fires heavy projectiles. The Guardian Legend, 1989. Developed by Compile in 1989, the Guardian Legend stands out by seamlessly switching between top-down Zelda-like adventure exploration and smooth vertical shoot-'em-up sequences. You play as Miria, a cybernetic warrior tasked with destroying the alien-infested megaworld of Naju. The art direction depicts a variety of alien biomes and environments, which play really well with the entire concept of exploring the alien world of Naju. While exploring the labyrinthine surface on foot, you navigate organic alien forests, frozen ruins, and dark corridors with strict color palettes, establishing a distinct mood for each zone. When descending into Naju's planetary defense system, the game transitions into a fast-paced scrolling shooter, drawing on Compile's legacy and the genre. These flying sections feature rapid background progression to simulate intense velocity, and had me actually panicking at points with the speed and the obstacle and enemies flying towards me. Miria fluidly transforms her humanoid form into a sleek starfighter whenever she enters a flight corridor. The screen routinely fills with a chaotic array of enemy projectiles and laser fire without compromise. Gargoyle's Quest 2. 1992. Most NES games go for vibrant and cartoony due to the limited colors, but Capcom made a dark, gothic masterpiece in 1992 with expert shading and rendering on the NES. Heavy use of shading, dithering, artistic rendering, and pseudo 3D effects makes this world come to life and look massive. The worlds and characters are creatively designed with tons of gothic horror, Halloween, and unique monster designs that I absolutely love. The protagonist, Firebrand, has lots of animation states and abilities, including Fire Breath, the ability to climb vertical surfaces, and hoverflight. You explore towns in an overworld map in a top-down RPG view, chatting with ghouls and buying items, but the moment you enter a dungeon or a random encounter, the game shifts into a side-scrolling platformer. Progression is also fairly solid, starting off weak and a hover that barely lasts a second. But as you beat bosses, explore the world, and gain upgrades, you increase the wing meter, get higher jumps and new abilities. Abilities such as the Magic Tornado, which can create temporary platforms, allowing you to reach higher platforms and adding to the platforming sandbox. Ufouria the Saga. Hebereke, JP and EU, 1991. Developed by Sunsoft in 1991, Ufouria the Saga, also known in Japan as Hebereke, is a fun, cartoony, bright, and cheery exploration-based platformer. The visual presentation leans heavily into a quirky, cartoonish style, utilizing large, highly expressive sprites with many different animation states. You start as Bop Louie, a small snowman-like creature, navigating an interconnected world filled with bizarre cartoony enemies like walking lips and oversized birds. As you explore, you recruit 3 additional playable characters: Freon Leon, Shades, and Gil. Each one has completely unique character models, idle animations, and movement mechanics that change how you traverse the environment. Every enemy and the main character have smooth, exaggerated animations, with unique animations for going from idle to walking, skidding to a stop, turning around, jumping, landing, and other animation. You'll be platforming across many fantastical biomes, from crystalline ice caves to cloud-filled floating ruins to sprawling vertical rainforests, all colored with fun pastel palettes. Unlike linear platformers, the map requires constant backtracking, making the game feel more like a Metroidvania than any other platformer on the NES. Crisis Force, Famicom only, on the JP console, 1991. Developed by Konami in 1991, at the peak of their domination of the game's market, this vertical shooter is a technical masterpiece. A vertical shoot-'em-up that looks like it should be running on a Genesis, not the NES. Konami utilized aggressive flickering and rapid tile swapping to create the illusion of multiple background layers moving at different speeds, something the NES hardware technically cannot do. You fly through canyons that seem to have actual depth, over oceans with waves, and through clouds that scroll independently from the ground. It is the closest the system ever came to actual parallax scrolling. I love the way it feels like the game has a camera shake, and with how the player interacts with enemies and objects on the ground plane, it's a surprisingly cohesive and cinematic game. The bosses are multi-sprite enemies with moving parts, transforming limbs, and complex attack pattern. In most NES games, a boss this size would cause the game to lag and slow to a crawl. But here, the frame rate stays steady, even with 2-player co-op. Gimmick, Famicom only on JP, 1992. Sunsoft is one of the wizards of the NES, making many incredible games, and Gimmick, released in 1992, is considered one of their best, as this game looks like it belongs to the SNES and not the NES. The artists used incredibly complex shading and dithering techniques to give the objects and background incredible depth and shading, and with an artfully chosen color palette that bucks the standard high-contrast primary colors for soft pastels and gradients, creating a storybook aesthetic that defies the system's limitations. The primary weapon is a star that you generate above your head, which has complex inertia and bouncing physics. You can throw it to hit enemies, of course, but if you bounce it off a wall, you can jump on it, using it as a platform to reach greater heights. You can also surf with your star, allowing you to slide on diagonals and build up momentum to fly up quarter pipes. The enemy AI is robust for a platformer as they react, track you, and react with each other. Shadow of the Ninja, 1990. Shadow of the Ninja, also known as Blue Shadow in Europe and Kage in Japan, was developed by Natsume in 1990, who also developed Shatterhand, by the way. You play as Hayate or Kaede, 2 ninjas from the Iga clan sent to assassinate the dictator, Emperor Garuda, in a futuristic dystopian 2029 New York City. Essentially the classic infiltrate the stronghold and take out the boss arcade plot. You have a sword for close range and a Kusarigama chain sickle that can be thrown in multiple directions, allowing you to attack enemies from reach. The game is tough, but fair, and its biggest selling point is its excellent 2-player mode, one of the best on the NES, where you and your buddy can fight through the enemy horde together with no flickering or slowdown. The visuals are also top tier for the NES, utilizing deep blacks and different dithering effects to create depth and shadows in the art, making the space feel larger than it actually is. G.I. Joe, The Atlantis Factor, 1992. Developed by Kid in 1992, G.I. Joe, The Atlantis Factor serves as the sequel to the highly regarded 1991 original. The game drops players onto a risen Atlantean continent controlled by the villainous Cobra Commander. The map, instead of being a linear action game as I had originally expected, was a branching overworld that allowed players to tackle stages in different orders. You start off as General Hawk, but you gradually rescue and recruit a familiar roster of members like Duke, Roadblock, Wetsuit, Storm, Shadow, and Snake Eyes. Each character has varied and easily identifiable sprites, which you would think should be the norm for games featuring iconic and fan-favorite characters, but alas, this game stands out for its character design. Each one also has specialized movement mechanics, such as Wetsuit's underwater diving abilities or Snake Eyes' high jumps. There's a variety of backgrounds, from dense jungle canopies and rocky mountain climbs to mechanized underground cobra bases, keeping the scenery varied as you backtrack and explore new routes. The Flintstones. The Surprise at Dinosaur, 1994. Released in 1994 near the absolute end of the console's commercial lifespan, The Flintstones, The Surprise at Dinosaur Peak is widely recognized for its extreme rarity as a rumored blockbuster rental exclusive. Taito leveraged years of 8-bit development experience to produce an action platformer that visually rivals early 16-bit titles. All the characters feature large, cartoon-accurate sprites with unique and on-model idle animations and varied facial expressions. In fact, I do believe almost all of the game assets are on-model, from the bright cartoony, almost painterly color palette, to the environmental design, to the design of the dinosaurs and other creatures. Fred climbs ledges and swings his heavy club, which requires a multi-frame wind-up animation, all of which are smooth and bouncy. They also integrated several visual set pieces and minigame, including a surprisingly fluid surfing sequence in a prehistoric hockey match against a giant monkey. These segments introduce entirely new sprite sets and scrolling techniques, ensuring the presentation never grows stale. Boss encounters are equally polished, featuring massive dinosaurs and rival cavemen that animate smoothly. Totally Rad. 1991. Developed by ICOM in 1991, Totally Rad underwent a drastic localization process that transformed the Japanese release Magic John into an artifact of 1990s surfer dude culture. The narrative follows Jake, an apprentice magician tasked with rescuing his girlfriend from a subterranean alien army. The game distinguishes itself with highly detailed cinematic cutscenes between stages that have large anime-inspired character portraits and elaborate background art to deliver dialogue packed with period-specific slang like bogus and tubular. In gameplay, the visual direction has a varied color palette to render distinct environments ranging from generic city streets to biomechanical underground alien lair. Jake can transform into various animal forms, including an eagle, a lion, and a fish. Each transformation features a completely unique character sprites, idle animation, and movement mechanic, essentially offering 4 distinct playable characters. The game also has a magic system that dramatically alters the on-screen visuals. Instead of just firing a basic projectile, Jake can charge his attacks to unleash massive, multi-frame energy blasts. The spell menu allows him to summon such attacks as raining fire or cascading water, which fills the screen with specialized particle effects. Zen Intergalactic Ninja, 1993. Developed and published by Konami in 1993, Zen Intergalactic Ninja originated from an environmentally conscious comic book series before being adapted into an action platform. The narrative follows a blue alien martial artist tasked by the Gordian entity to stop Lord Contaminus from completely polluting Earth. Rather than only having a standard side-scrolling format, the game features complex isometric stages where Zen must navigate diagonal conveyor belts, dodge security lasers, and plant timed explosives. The backgrounds deliver on the environmental message, contrasting lush forest environments against grim, heavily industrialized factories oozing with green toxic waste and thick gray smog. Zen wields a photon stick that leaves a satisfying visual trail, and his acrobatic flips and jumps are rendered with numerous frames of animation to ensure fluid momentum. There are also pseudo 3D visual tricks during specific high-speed segments, such as a forward-scrolling minecart sequence. Konami applied its signature late-generation polish to the project, delivering a striking visual presentation that constantly shifts perspectives to keep the player engaged. The NES library is full of visual surprises that go far beyond the standard classics everyone knows. Exploring these titles revealed creative art direction, shown how even art technology can advance in a short decade, and rediscover some amazing artwork and animation on the NES.